all so much for being here at Yampa Valley Sustainability Council's summer internship closeout presentations. My name is Dakota Dolan, and I'm the Forest Resilience Projects Manager with YVSC, and I also have the pleasure of running our internship program. I'm so excited and thrilled for these 4 individuals to share with you what they've been working on this term. I've been so inspired by this group. They've just been so engaged and friendly and dedicated, and I'm just very inspired by them. So I'm very excited for them to share what they've been working so hard on. And for anyone who is not familiar with the program, YVSC hosts a 12-week professional experience for young professionals and students to gather the experience that they need from a local nonprofit, kind of as a full-on staff member. So we give them the responsibility of an independently led project. They're paired with a staff mentor, and through this process, they come up with a project with deliverables and outcomes that they're hoping will advance our programming as an organization. So it's a very important role that you play, and I'm so honored that I got to be part of this. And with that, before we begin, we'll have a few words from our Executive Director, Michelle Stewart.
Thank you so much, Cody, for the great introduction to the program and everyone for joining today. Thank you to our stellar interns for your awesome work this quarter, or this term. So they are 12-week terms, and I'd say that for most staff, I'd say board and staff probably, these final presentations are such inspiring, energizing, just probably one of our 3 favorite days of the year. There are 3 of them, but this is probably going to be the best one because it really showcases the power and the impact that our youth leaders bring to this work. And so it really is a strong mooring of the program, is that we're really trying to find ways to connect and engage those rising leaders that really are going to help build the future that we all need and the one that we're working towards today. So my name is Michelle Stewart. Thank you for coming and for being part of the celebration of these final presentations. I've been the Executive Director at Yampa Valley Sustainability Council now for 4 years. And just this past Tuesday, actually, we had the great pleasure of having a conversation with Senator Bennett to join for a conversation that was focused on climate resilience, climate action. So really thinking about mitigation and adaptation and the important work that we have on the table today. And that's really the work that we're also doing as an organization. So we're guided by the mission to serve as a leader, resource, and catalyst for building a sustainable and resilient Yampa Valley region. And really at our core is climate action. So finding ways to enact actions that both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build resilience to changes that are already here and those that are coming, namely in Colorado, we really see that as increased temperatures, which is causing drying. And so everything we can do to shift our systems away from fossil fuels and everything we can do to invest in our land and water-based climate solutions like planting trees, increasing our understanding of change, all of it really matters. And so that's why this internship program is such an inspiring and important part of how we operate as an organization, because so much of it is knowledge transfer, but also climate work is really about all of us coming together and bringing our capabilities and our inspiration and everything that we're really wanting to build and doing that work together. So we're super excited, no pressure. This is probably the friendliest audience you'll ever have. So I really invite all participants, please think of good questions. We'll have time after the presentations to ask questions. You'll have lots of them. And then, of course, it's just a really wonderful reflection of the great work you've done over this 12-week term. So we're delighted, and it's my great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, and thank you all for coming.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruby Stevens, and I've been the Forest Resilience Intern this summer with YVSC. My project has been centered around communicating the importance of forest resilience and regeneration to the community here, specifically revolving around post-burn forest resilience and regeneration surveys, which I will soon go into. So a little bit about me. I grew up in Denver, but I've always had family in Steamboat, and so spent a lot of time up here, and it's been wonderful to spend a summer here. Currently, I am going into my 3rd year at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. This is a picture of me in a soil pit with my forestry friends. So I also love hiking. I'm an aerialist. I love live music, any sort of travel. Always loved wildlife and just being outdoors in general. And then I've also worked for 8 months at UBC Sustainability. We did a lot of climate justice related projects, and so that was a great I don't know, start into this work outside of academics. So my staff mentors this summer have been Executive Director Michelle Stewart, as well as Dakota Dolan, the Forest Resilience Project Manager, and our intern manager, and like my specific mentor. So my partner for this project has been Aaron Lutz. He works as a silviculturist at the U.S. Forest Service, and so really integral part of my project has been involved with them, and so I will also go into that project shortly. Before I explain my project, I wanted to take a moment to introduce it with the land acknowledgement, which some of you may or may not already be familiar with. Land acknowledgements have become an important component to my work and studies at UBC, which is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam people. Elevating Indigenous voices is central to conservation work all over the world, so I felt compelled to include it here, as we cannot talk about social and environmental issues in isolation. So Steamboat Springs, this place on which we live, love, work, and play, holds a special place in many of our hearts. We are currently situated on the traditional homelands of the Indigenous Ute tribe. And to feel gratitude for this wonderful place is to feel gratitude for the original stewards of this place. And also to acknowledge the historical and continuous systemic violence against Indigenous peoples and against the land itself. In pursuing sustainability, in many ways, we are endeavoring to embody Indigenous knowledge systems rooted in place-based knowledge, reciprocity, and storytelling. When we speak about climate change and resilience, it boils down to intergenerational equity. What seems to be an innate human desire for our future generations to inherit a world which is not only livable, but on which they may experience all the layers of joy and lessons from the natural world. I would like to invite those of us who are settlers here to reflect on our own positionality and responsibilities to care for this land, for one another, and for the future. I'd encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the following questions posed by Dr. Lauren Jerk, who is an assistant teaching professor in Indigenous education at the University of Victoria. And I'd also implore you to continue to seek out resources created by Indigenous folks and to dig deep and learn about Indigenous history, systems, and present struggles and movements for change. And so the questions I have here are, how do you show gratitude for the land, and what does it mean to practice reciprocity? So I'm going to continue on with my presentation, but you could sit with these for a couple minutes or lifetimes, like your choice. So I'll start with a little bit of context here. As the Forest Resilience Intern, it's important that I define this word resilience, which is often used as a management strategies, and it can have a lot of different specific definitions. The one that I've chosen here is an ecosystem's ability to respond to disturbance or to bounce back to its original state. And so our Western montane forests here face an array of compounded threats, which are causing concerns about declining resilience. And so some of those threats include wildfires, climate change, beetle and disease outbreak, historic fire suppression, and land use change. There's also things like fragmentation. So something like a road would fragment an ecosystem, just for example. But the two threats that I focused on primarily for my project are wildfires and climate change. The combination of these two things, essentially climate change is exacerbating wildfires and changing the ability of our forests to respond and grow back. So this is manifesting in a failure to regrow in some of our forests here. This is a trend that we're starting to notice. And this leads to a loss of ecosystem services. And so ecosystem services are services provided from or by ecosystems to humans. So think about the way that this land and ecosystems sustain you. There's a lot of things that we maybe don't think about. A big one to focus on that I would like to highlight is watershed health. So healthy, intact forests filter water, they control erosion and runoff timing. These are all super important in order to avoid things like flooding or mass movements like landslides, and also to preserve our water quality. Another one I'd like to focus on is carbon sequestration. As most of you know, climate change is caused by an excess of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which trap heat. And trees are naturally designed to sequester carbon. So they take in atmospheric carbon, which is a greenhouse gas, and they incorporate it into their mass. And so this positive feedback cycle I have written right here, in other words, it's like a self-reinforcing cycle, is when fires burn stands of trees and then releases carbon into the atmosphere. And then that worsens climate change, and then that like increases the likelihood of wildfires and increases their severity and the area burned. So it's a self-reinforcing cycle there. And then another important aspect of our forests is that they're habitat for biodiversity. So all of our wonderful wildlife here. And they provide cultural services too. So those are our emotional, spiritual ties to land, as well as any sort of recreation. Those all count as recreation or as cultural services. And then lastly, this is not an ecosystem service, but the intrinsic value of ecosystems is something that I think is important to point out, that ecosystems have value regardless of the value we assign it. And so, yeah. So sorry, I can't actually see my, sorry, one second. You're good. Okay, so my project objectives were to build community understanding of forest resilience and participation in post-burn regeneration surveys, which I will explain in my story map, which Darby also just described. I made one for this specific purpose. I also added capacity to regen surveys and helped to engage and like kind of train volunteers. And my personal goal was to gain experience in fieldwork and conservation communications. Those are two main things that I've been really interested in. So I designed a GIS story map, which I will click on shortly and show you. And then I kind of touched on some of this stuff. I also created some flyers and social posts to help recruit volunteers. And then I participated in other YVSC fundraising and volunteering events like Insight and Emmy's event and the Money Slide tree planting, and all of those helped give context to creating my story map and to kind of understanding how climate action works in general. But yeah, so I will this. Okay. So some of this I've already covered. It's just context, and so I'll scroll through a little bit of this, but here's just a map of wildfires in Routt County since 2010. And then down here, I just wanted to highlight our partnership as well with the Forest Service. So as Cody said, it's really a symbiotic relationship. We add hands, we add capacity to doing regen surveys at YVSC, so we can help the Forest Service accomplish that. And that helps us in our like YVSC and our mission of resilience. So yeah. And so here are post-burn priority sites. So this little guy up here is Big Red Park. This was a smaller fire. And then down here is our bigger one. This is the Silver Creek fire. It's just south of Rabbiteers Pass. And so you usually don't see it when you're driving by, but it's down there and it's very large. So go. So regen surveys, just to like explain in a little bit more detail what those are. It's a way to measure a number of variables that help us understand the likelihood and success of forest regeneration. And so we walk around, we hook around to these little dots. And once we get to the middle of one on our little iPads, on our little GPS, we stick a stake in the ground with a 10-foot string attached to it. And we walk around in a circle and we look for things. And the things that we're looking for are, this is just some of them. There are more, but these are the big ones. Our overhead seed source. So are there trees that are mature enough and big enough nearby that could potentially drop a seed in the area? And so we're looking for that. Then cones, we're looking for cones as well. Are they open, closed? Are they new? Are they old? All of that gives us some information. We're looking for baby trees, of course. It's always very heartwarming to find a baby tree on your plot. So it's good news. So we're counting those, and then we're looking at the percentage of bare mineral soils. That can kind of be indicative of, you know, is there vegetation growing there? How is the soil health? All of that stuff. So just kind of, let me see if I can drag it. There we go. Yeah, okay. And so, yeah, so the data tells us whether or not human intervention is needed. So it allows us to determine priority sites where forests aren't regenerating properly as we would expect them to after fire. And then we can, that allows us to allocate resources towards things like tree planting. So, yeah. And that's the story map. And that's gonna go on the YVSC webpage as well in the forest resilience area, which there is not a lot there right now. And so this will kind of help to build that out a bit. Okay, and so my results, so participating in regen surveys informed my story map. And I also got almost all of my images for the story map from doing those surveys. And then I also, so that, like I mentioned earlier, the story map filled the gap on the webpage and can increase accessibility, and just it provides an educational resource for people and an opportunity to get involved. And then, so in the bigger picture, the data we collected this summer and the analysis that will follow will lead to tree plantings eventually, and the ultimate goal is to help restore some forest resilience here. My key takeaways, oh, did I? Okay. Sorry, switching them on two computers, I'm like forgetting. So I definitely developed a deeper understanding of climate action. I think maybe before this, I didn't really understand the in-between stage of like, yeah, you want to do something and then you do it. But there's like a lot of steps in between that you need to get to that actual climate action piece. And so these regen surveys are a prime example of that. You need to collect the data before you can allocate resources. And that's just, yeah, super important. I also I started to understand on a deeper level the link between public communications and forest resilience. This isn't something that we can't build forest resilience alone as individuals or even alone as an organization. Like we need, it's really like power in numbers for this sort of thing. And so understanding how you can engage the public, this is like that conservation communications thing that I mentioned earlier is what I'm interested in. I really enjoy writing. And trying to like get other people as excited about lodgepoles as I am is difficult sometimes. So learning how to do that is important. And then I also learned a lot about disturbance ecology and like fire ecology specifically. It's really complicated and but it's really important in the face of climate change. Things are changing, our environmental conditions are changing, and our ecosystem's ability to respond to those changes is an important thing to look at if we want to preserve resilience. And my personal takeaways, similar to Darby, career development and professional communication. This has been a great experience to work with a lot of individuals and yeah, learn how to conduct myself in a professional setting. And it's also given me some greater direction in what I want to pursue as my career. I've definitely built organizational skills, research and synthesis skills. A lot of what preceded this was creating a long annotated bibliography. And I might be one of the few people who actually enjoys research and reading papers and then writing about them. And then I think I've upped my graphic design skills from like subpar to like website worthy. So that's cool. And then I got kind of to dip my toes into field work a little bit, which has been fun. It's great to get outside and to feel like you're making a difference. And then I've also made a lot of connections with some wonderful people, and that's been just fantastic. So yeah, and then my acknowledgements. Also, Nicole Pepper, Darby and I both worked with her. She was our GIS specialist. I was like, what the heck is a shapefile? And she helped me figure some of that out and like actually make maps. So that was cool. And then she also helped with some of the design stuff as well. And then I'd also like to thank Abby. Thank you for all your feedback on everything. All of our deliverables in writing, at least mine went through Abby because I was like, you know, it's great to get feedback. And so that was really helpful. And then Ryan Messenger, who's a Natural Climate Solutions Project Manager, I shadowed him for a day at California Park on a wetland restoration project with the Rocky Mountain Youth Corps. And that was really hard work, but it was good. It was good to experience that. And then I'd also want to thank our fellow interns and then also Megan, who's our field technician. It was just really inspiring to see them like work on stuff that they're passionate about and carry out these projects that were awesome. Yeah, it was just great to see you guys do all of that. So, and then my honorable mentions, these go without saying. And then, any questions? I'm gonna pitch. Yeah, Lena.
So, great presentation. So I have one question. So when you're looking, you're out there surveying and making sure to see, is this going to like regenerate on its own, right? So how much of that is, I mean, I understand that you also have you need to know where to allocate your resources and so on. But is there also a risk when you have human intervention that you get less biodiversity when you don't, I mean, when it does if it doesn't regenerate on its own, so to speak, is that also something that you take into account? So not just like the resources that you put into it, but also that it might be more natural, more biodiverse if left alone, if it can do on its own.
I don't think the risk is that it would be less biodiverse. We need living trees to support all other biodiversity. I can understand like maybe habitat homogeneity if you're planting the same species of tree and it's like in a row, but it's still better to have live trees there than not to have live trees there. And so once we find those priority sites and we do that, it can help in the long run, just preserve what we have left.
I'm thinking, yeah, I guess I'm thinking more in terms of you have like opportunist species that come in after like a forest fire, after anything like that. You have these species that come in that don't normally live, like once the forest is up there, you get less of those opportune species. So every time you have like a forest fire, you have an opportunity for more biodiversity, right?
Yeah.
In some ways, but also with our current, like, with hotter and drier temperatures, it's definitely influencing the way that our forests are responding and the biodiversity that can follow a fire. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, Scott.
I have two questions. First one's really simple, hopefully. Your partner, Aaron, at the Forest Service, the title that you have for him was what is his title and what does that mean?
Yeah. So he kind of does some like overarching stuff. So he does some of the stuff that even I don't have like a great definition of this, but I know he works with harvesting and also planting and understanding forest dynamics in that sort of way. So definitely with human intervention and human use. So he's been, yeah, that's all I can give you.
It was a title I had never seen before.
Yeah.
Second question is, over this course of these 12 weeks and the surveys that you did, how much acreage or how vast of a area did your group see surveys for?
So there are hundreds of plots. Us specifically, we probably did a bit over 100 plots. So the Forest Service is also working on this. Our goal is just to add capacity. So I'm not sure exactly what that acreage is, but we made a dent.
But 10,
How big is a plot?
It's a 10-foot, it's a circle with
By
10-foot
10.
radius. Yeah. Yeah. And they're evenly spaced out. I'm not sure exactly what that distance is, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't feel very even, but
There's one per acre. 1 per acre, and it was,
Okay.
the area that we were in was roughly a 200 acre area.
what? Wow. Thanks.
That was really wonderful. Good job.
Totally.
I was
Yeah.
So it sort of ties it into the other. But after a fire and before human intervention would go in to replant, what is the time period?
I think it can depend. Our conifers are pretty slow to grow. I don't have an exact number for you, but usually it starts with like primary colonizers. And so we're doing these regen surveys several years after fire has occurred. And usually it's like, maybe there's some baby trees. It's usually a lot of fireweed, and kind of shorter understory vegetation. To get back to a full forest would be a pretty long timeline, I think.
Like, and how much, so I'm asking because I'm wondering, how long do you give the forest a chance to do its own thing before intervention happens?
I would say somewhere around like 5 years would be that timeline.
Then I have a follow-up question too. The initial questions you asked us, one of the, how do you, was it show gratitude to the land? What's your answer?
Lovely question. It's a ballsy answer. I think sometimes it can take a physical form. I think for me, it's definitely been very mental. You know, to like when I'm outside to really think about the impact that I'm having on my surrounding environment, and also just to, you know, be consciously grateful for it. But it's an ongoing process of, you know, learning and unlearning too, of practices and thought patterns that can, you know, build your awareness and your gratitude. Yeah, Tim.
Great job, Ruby. You did a really nice job explaining the dynamics of what's happening in our forest. And I think you're spot on that we need to do a better job of helping people understand that. And you helped us greatly in moving that direction. One aspect of what you did, and I'm just curious your thought, is we were involving volunteers in what is now called community science, right? Gathering data that helps us understand what we could be doing, what's happening to the environment, what's doing. I'm curious in your time with our volunteers, how you think that being able to do this kind of work, which is not always easy. I know what it takes to do those surveys, let alone the wet meadow restoration, which is even harder. What do you think you heard them saying that they gained from it, that we should be sort of focusing on as we try to continue to build more and more of these activities?
A lot of them really seemed like they were just curious individuals and like had an inkling of interest in these regen surveys, and so they went for it. And it's not a super huge commitment. Like it's, you know, you could just commit to an 8-hour day if you wanted to, if your work schedule allows, and if you're, you know, physically capable of doing it. I don't know. I think also building curiosity in people, like just like it's hard to imagine as somebody who's, I feel like, innately interested in this work, to engage people who aren't already curious about it. That's something I feel like I would need to think about. I think a lot of them gained, similar to me, a deeper understanding of climate action and forest resilience. And so when we were out there, and also in the car for many hours sometimes, you know, they would ask me or Cody questions, kind of about the impact that this work is having. And yeah, I don't know, curious individuals, I guess, is the majority of people that we saw, but yeah.
I think to dovetail to that question, is there anything that you've built within this new website design that would allow someone like me to say, hey, I'm really interested and I could do an 8-hour shift? Like, is that something that could be added? You know, hey, if you're interested, sign up, we'll contact you.
Yes,
thing?
I just skipped over it. It's at the very
Okay.
end there. It says to, if interested, to contact Cody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you had in one of your earlier slides, you had something about the forest resilience and the current threats and so on. And I know you were focusing on wildfires and climate change, but you had something about historic fire suppression.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious if that's because I've heard that people say, I mean, I've heard about like in terms of wildfires, that if you have too much suppression of wildfires, then you just you basically have too much vegetation by the time you actually have huge wildfires. So you get more damage than you would if you had lots of little ones. Is that what that was about, or was it about something else?
Definitely, that's a big part of it. It's all of these disturbances are kind of, they're interconnected. And so historic fire suppression also left a lot of trees, a really high density of trees, and that has an influence over how quickly disease and beetles can spread. And that also contributes to fire, in addition to just having a higher fuel load. There's a lot of things that, yeah, connect there.